I do want to start today's demonstration by letting everyone know to stay safe here in the hot shop. Now that the summer's out, the sun's setting down like at 10, which is pretty crazy nowadays. But again, the Museum of Glass will now also be heating up. We do offer complimentary water when you enter the museum. On your right-hand side, we have water. Please, everyone, stay hydrated. We'll do the same down here. If it gets a little too hot, if you're nauseous, you can always exit the museum. We have a fantastic place where you can view the live glassmaking out in our grand hall. We have a lounge area, and we have TVs out there set up with our live stream. I want to really say is everyone, please stay safe and stay hydrated. Here in a little bit, our team will begin the glassmaking process, however, and I'll come out here and kind of talk about what's going on here today. My name is David. I'm going to be your MC here today. I love questions, by the way. It's my favorite part about my job that I have is answering questions. So at any given time, if you're wondering about what's going on, you can raise your hand or shout my name, and I'll be right on over to answer any questions that you may have, even about the stuff that's laying around like something like this that we're not really focusing on today, but it is here. If you ask me about it, I'm more than happy to tell you all about this massive glass we have inside. But I thank you again for joining us this summer with our Museum of Glass Hot Shop crew. Here today we do have quite a special day. We do have a visiting artist that I will now introduce named Leo Berk. Now Leo's around here. The hot shop, it looks like he stepped off, but that's totally fine. On our top screen here, I am going to show you a little bit about his work and where he's coming from, and eventually we'll lead up to what we're going to be making here today. But Leo will be our visiting artist until Sunday. So Sunday will be his last day. And typically the way that this museum works is there's so many different ways an artist ends up at the museum. Now it could be their residency can begin from application. We can ask them to come down here. The point is there's a few different ways, a handful of different ways an artist can end up here. Once you end up here at the museum, you're granted up to 5 days with our professional crew that you have here. Throughout the day, I'll be introducing our professional crew we have. But before we get started, I do want to show you some of Leo's work so we can understand a little bit more about our artist and where he's coming from, and essentially where is this residency going towards. Now, our visiting artist here today, he's not a glassmaker, and this is his first time experiences using glass as a medium. But that's totally fine. Again, the artists that we have coming through the museum, some of them are artists, some of our designers, architects. To us, the background really doesn't matter. They can be teachers too, which we've had here. The background does not matter to us. It's the ideas you propose, and that is what we're looking for. We see a drawing of what we're going to be making here today, which is this piece down here. We're very specific with the dimensions also. By the way, this is how every day starts off with. It's with seeing the drawing, what we're making, and then the glass makers, this professional crew that you see here, diagnosing the glass piece itself and figuring out what is the best way and most efficient way to create our drawing. This crew consists of Mr. Gabe Feenan down here with the black hat. He's been blowing glass for over 20 years, 22 years to be exact. We then have Courtney Branham down here. Courtney is a professional glassmaker with over 25 years. And then lastly, we have Sarah Gilbert down here. another professional glassmaker with over 18 years. Just to hit a highlight about them, Sarah recently was asked to fly out to Murano, Italy, where she was asked to give a demonstration of her amazing artwork in this year's GAS conference, this annual glassblowing conference around the world. And Sarah was one of those few artists that was asked to present some of her work, which is just amazing. The last crew member that we have joining this crew is Mr. Nick Davis down here. He is our hot shop tech, ensuring that this hot shop is running at full capacity, efficiency, and also producing any small things that we might need from him. Like, I don't know, if there's a tool that we haven't used before, it's never been done before, well, Nick can real quickly make us something if needed. Now, the piece of glass that we work with will have a decorative design. And when we see down here, Moira's been cutting up these long shards of glass. So if we see these pieces of glass, earlier we created this what's called cane. We stretched it from one end of the room to the opposite, laying them down in these ladders that we have. These are cooling racks, so the glass doesn't get dirty or sticky or any bad residue that might be left behind. These chunks of glass are then broken up to smaller bits of glass. And these are the lines that we will use in our piece. While you're going through our gallery, through our store, and you notice that a piece has lines in the glass, this is what that looks like, and this is our starting point here today. So we're going to be making our piece out of these canes throughout the day. If we need to produce more of this, well, we'll see that later during that day, but this is the starting point that we see our glass in the state. For those of our visitors who joined us a little later, we welcome you to the museum. Don't forget to always stay safe here at the museum. We do offer complimentary water. Everyone, make sure you're staying hydrated. So this is our starting point here. So down on this left-hand side, if you're standing right here, sitting on this side, you're going to see some of the work that we made earlier. Now notice it's made very differently now. We made these beautiful shapes and then went back and distorted all of these vessels. And that's exactly what we're going for. To see some of Leo's current work, you can go to Tacoma Art Museum, and you can also go to the University District in Seattle, where in the Transit Center, he has a public installation. Thank you so much. Now, this museum is all about creating exactly what our artist has asked for, and he's asked for specific dimensions, so that's what exactly he's going to get. Our crew is incredibly talented, so they're taking accurate measurements of everything to ensure when we're working on this piece on this hot shop floor. So as we start here, I do want to start off with a hot shop, introducing the equipment that we have here. One of the glass makers is now gathering glass out of a hot furnace. This is where all the glass that we work with here starts from. It's hard to believe, but that cane I showed everyone earlier today, that glass was inside of our furnace at a molten state. Behind this door lies a ceramic pot, as you see on the top screen. That ceramic pot is heated by natural gas, which is our fuel source. And that glass is about the same temperature as molten lava, which is at 2100 degrees. So it's incredibly behind that ceramic pot, that crucible that we are heating up with natural gas. We do have another piece of equipment called the glory hole. This is slightly different than the furnace. The key difference between this glory hole and the furnace is that this contains zero glass. This contains no glass at all. It is just the fire we enter to soften the glass and continue to work on it. It is slightly hotter than the furnace, sitting at 2300 degrees. And this is one of the main reasons why we call this the hot shop. because as a piece gets larger and larger, we'll open more and more doors to accommodate a size. Very quickly, as the glass makers aren't using this chamber, I do want to share some of that heat that we're exposed to. Can everyone feel that heat, right? Oh, it feels quite hot. I'm only opening half of it too. Later on, I'll go ahead and open the other half so we can feel the rest of the heat. So for our audience sitting on this end, you didn't really get to feel the heat too much. Totally fine, because I'm going to open this opposite door. And Moira, it might get a little hot on that end also, but we can feel a little bit more of that heat also. Again, we'll try to keep as many of these doors closed to keep the heat insulated in this area. But sometimes, as the piece gets larger, there is nothing to do but continue to have those doors open. Hopefully I haven't lost anyone just quite yet, but we are going to be working with color here today. Sitting in our garage, a temporary place where we can store glass and keep it nice and warm, we have our color sitting inside. The color itself is bought from a manufacturer that makes the colors out of different metals of the periodic table of elements. What gives us coloring glass is specifically metals. So if you're sitting on this end, you're seeing a variety of different colors that Leo, our visiting artist, has brought the museum. So this is all our color palette that we'll be working today. But when you're purchasing color, it's like going to a candy store. They sell absolutely every single color you could ever imagine, which is quite amazing. I mean, this color goes from the ceiling to the floor, and oh man, it's so fun every time you're purchasing color. However, some of these colors are made specifically with metals. We'll go through those metals very quickly to create red and pink glass. We use gold, which makes this color some of the more expensive color in the glass industry. Again, it's due to that gold content. To create black, we can use manganese, and by adding a little bit of manganese, we can produce purple. To make green glass, we would use iron and chromium. Blue glass is made from cobalt and lapis, again, specifically metals. And we can even use uranium in glass, which creates a glow-in-the-dark green. Now, we've already done the coloring of picking up the solid color, which starts off in our garage being preheated. And we can see Sarah down on the left-hand side. At the end of her rod, she has the solid color. And what she's doing is she's making that long bar more suitable. So she's making it smaller and hotter. We're going to drop this solid color right on top of a starting bubble. So down here, we see Courtney Bram. He's gathered glass on the end of the rod, and he's been shaping it by rolling back and forth on the steel table. Here in a little bit, he's going to pressurize the rod by blowing air. He places his finger over the blowpipe. Since we created a closed environment, that air is going to want to continue to expand, and it will pierce a small air bubble on the glass side. Now that we have that starting bubble, we will drop the solid color on top of the bubble. What we're going to do here is only produce a thin layer of color that will be sandwiched in between clear glass. The majority of glass in your home is probably playing the same color overlay trick, where we distribute that color nice and evenly. On the side view, this piece will look completely solid, but we cut this piece in half, we can notice what really is going on, is that clear glass on the surface has the property of magnification, which will magnify the underlaying color. Now, it is possible for some of the glass in your home to be solid color, but that is more on the rarer side. Typically, they would do this solid coloring application. Once we're ready, we're going to drop that color. I said it earlier, but what we're going for is the even amount. So the tricky part here is ensuring that we have enough glass to coat that bubble, but pushing it evenly so there's not different amounts of densities throughout our vessel, which we might see on the ending vessel. We might notice that one side has more color than the opposite side, and that can be due to uneven distribution. And this just takes practice long time working with glass, understanding what's going on and what movements you need to do to ensure that that glass will be spread out evenly. So everyone that's here with us right now will see this coloring application. Typically, the coloring application happens very early in the process. One of the first things we do. After that, we can begin to gather the amount of glass that we want. So Sarah comes over with that solid color. We place it right on top of that bubble. A nice snip cuts the color free. And now the distribution of the glass will continue. The building that we have here at the Museum of Glass, although it's very iconic, it is very functional also. There is hot shops around the world that have this similar design. Most of the hot shops are no longer here, but there has been hot shops throughout history that have this cone-shaped design. They're just not at this scale. I mean, this is incredibly, incredibly large for a hot shop, probably one of the biggest ones ever created. On our top screen now, we're seeing a diagram, or a picture of what we call a wigwam burner, or a beehive burner. Where we're located here in Tacoma, there used to be a logging industry back in the olden day. Nowadays, this logging industry is gone, but these beehive burners or wigwam burners used to stand exactly where we're at right now, the fossil waterway. They They used to stand around here, and this is where they would burn excess wood. All of these are now gone. The closest one, after a little bit of research, is in Aberdeen, Washington. I don't think it's even functional anymore. I think they're about to tear it down also. And that's the closest one to our area. But this museum was also built in that memory of those wigwam burners that would scatter our area. If you notice on the very top of our museum, we have a giant fan up there that just accelerates the natural chimney that's created. Hot air likes to rise, and it can just be sucked away, allowing us to stay nice and cool all year around. I typically say that the winter is the best time to be a glassmaker here at the museum. But in this museum, it's all the time. Due to this cone-shaped design, we're ready to build glass, and we're staying nice and cool all year around. Well, we're now beginning to pick everything up and speed it up. Again, the first thing we had to do was set up the color. And now that that's being set up, down on the center, we're going to be focusing on something else that we're going to be attaching to our core on that left-hand side. Now, Sarah down here on the end of her plate has what we call a Steiner plate, a steel plate. Right now, we're beginning to absorb heat onto it, and here we have all our canes that we've already previously cut earlier in our demonstration. By preheating that cane, it's going to allow us to stick all these canes onto our glass, so that it will be the next step of coming back to our canes, laying them on our pastorelli plate, and then we can heat them up, and by rolling on the surface of the glass, we will be able to pick up all of those canes in one take. So all those canes will be added to our vessel here shortly. Throughout that time, on the left-hand side, we've been beginning to gather the amount of glass. And we've been using different tools like wooden blocks and steel blades to shape this massive glass, essentially to get it prepared for the next process. To ensure that these canes will heat up evenly, we're going to flip the plate to ensure that the heat is going to go all around of this plate nice and even. At that same time, notice on this left-hand side, Courtney is now entering the furnace for yet another layer. Remember, behind that door sits a crucible that is heated up by natural gas at 2100 degrees. This move that you just saw is called a strip gather. It's where we let go of excess glass that might still be on the rod. Typically, after a gather, we will use the wooden block to ensure that our massive glass has been distributed evenly around the bubble. And to shape the massive glass, one of the tools we will be using throughout our demonstration is a wet pad of a newspaper. Now, this newspaper only lasts a few days, but that is totally fine. We'll go ahead and fold a new pair and begin to burn that. We ensure that the top layer is nice and wet to ensure that nothing's going to catch on fire. Now, although any old newspaper will do, I got to admit, we are pretty picky down here at the Museum of Glass. We only burn the Wall Street Journal, and that is the only newspaper we will accept, so we can go ahead and burn that. Now, again, it only lasts a few days, but that's totally fine. We will just recycle our pair and then fold a new one, and we'll burn right through that. We can see at the same time that we've been shaping that massive glass with the wet padded newspaper, we're also blowing through the blowpipe. And this is expanding the bubble, and this is the actual glass blowing part of glass making. We've also been setting up all our canes on our little plate down here. We're going to begin to give an initial heat once we have them properly spaced out within one another, and we will roll on that very top layer. To ensure that we're going to have enough canes, we're measuring the diameter of these canes. Technically, due to pi, we can measure what should be the width of our bubble down here, since it will be 1/3 of that length. The team has been communicating a lot about how this vessel will be made, especially the very top portion, that very top peak. That's what the team has been really kind of figuring out, which is the best way to approach that idea and how to bring it all together. We're going to be making this vessel you see down here. It's our piece that we see down there. It's kind of a sculptural. It's the first time it's ever been made. Well, we always get asked here in the hot shop floor, what are the rods made out of that we're working with? And these rods are made out of stainless steel, which is a very poor conductor of heat. So our hands aren't getting really too hot. If we look down on this left-hand side and see where Courtney holds the rod, we'll notice that towards that tip, there is discoloration on the rod. Where the rod is black and gray, we're not placing our hand in that area. Rather, it's directly behind that, where that rod is still a little warm and cool. So this is that nice hot layer that we're going to add. By adding this layer, we're ensuring that our canes will stick to our surface of the glass due to that molten state. All right, well, if you want to show your friends or your family something unique you saw here at the museum, this top balcony is a great place to capture maybe a video or pictures, but you want to focus your attention down here on the plate. We're going to come right on over, we're going to roll on the surface and pick up all of these canes at once. Well, Gabe says the plan is to leave one cane left there on that plate. Isn't that just amazing? So when you go through our gallery and you notice that a piece has lines, they might be curvy, they might be waved out, but as long as they have kind of straight lines, chances are they use this cane technique to create that vessel. I do want to introduce our visiting artist, Leo Berk, down here. He's coming back to the hot shop. Again, he is our featured artist. He's going to be here until Sunday. But till then, we're going to be creating all this wonderful work. You can see some of that work down on the table we have here. Later on, we'll talk a little bit about what this collection is and what the plan of it is. I do want to stick with the glassmaking, however, as we roll back and forth on this steel table. Now, these tables are called a marvering table, and back in the olden day, these tables were made out of a solid slab of marble. That's where we're getting that name marver from. However, nowadays, it's been switched with the steel counterpart, which does the same thing, just not as expensive. And another thing is that marble can actually crack under enormous temperature. So if we gather hot glass and place it right on top of marble, we can crack that slab. Although it's not impossible, it is very rare. Every now and then you'll go to a studio and they'll be using a very small chunk of marble as their steel counterpart. Now, it doesn't matter what color we work with, it will always turn red and orange. But the color of the cord that we're working with is amber. That is a color, and the color of the stripes is black. For the majority of this process, however, we will just see a red and orange color hue. Its true color will be coming back once the glass is properly cooled down in a controlled environment. By using gravity, we can elongate our bubble. And then going back to the shaping tools, we see one of the glass makers down here, Sarah, standing by to blow air through the blowpipe. If you're wondering how much air we blow through the pipe, typically it's about 1 or 2 psi, which is about the same air pressure you use to blow out a candle. Now, although it's a very little bit amount of air, it will vary. And look at this teamwork going on between the Hot Shop team. Continue to turn that rod, ensure that our massive glass won't fall to the ground. And then down in the center, we have our gaffer. Remember, the gaffer is the person in charge, which in this case will be Gabe. He created a constriction towards the very top portion. Now, to make it clear exactly what we're making, we do have our chalk drawing down here. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be splitting this bubble in half down on the left-hand side. Corny has gathered on a different rod. We're going to split this in half. So that top portion, we created a break-off point. We'll be going to that bench. So this side will be staying here. We're going to be making one into essentially the platter that we need for the very bottom part, and then the next top part, which will be the curved area we see here. Essentially, we are creating this piece you see on the pedestal out of glass on a larger scale. Do we have any questions from our audience? Any questions that you may have about what you are seeing here today? Again, my name is David. I'm more than happy to also share my glass experience with you. So this torch that we're using is the hottest piece of equipment on this hot shop floor. We're going to ensure that both masses of glass will stick together to be made to separate parts of this glass piece. All right, so I kind of cleared some things up so I can explain exactly what's going to be going on. The piece down that you see on the left-hand side is going to be a bowl that will be very low, which will be making this part. So Sarah down on the left-hand side is going to begin the very bottom portion that we see, which is this kind of black area on this piece. Down in the center, we're going to focus on creating the curve that you see. And later on, then we will go ahead and attach the very cone-shaped design you see on the very top portion. These pieces are going to be joined together to make one solid piece later on. Down here, when we're talking to Gabe a little bit, he's saying that he's really excited for this challenge because it is a real challenge. Something like this probably has never been done before out of glass. We can't Google the instructions. We can't ask. It all takes experience, and sometimes we create our own techniques to make this vessel happen. The crew has already talked about some of the steps that they will take and that they know that they will encounter later on, but they're beginning to kind of clear that up. And as we go along here, they'll know more how to react. And again, this just takes experience working with glass. So the pipes that we use here are made out of stainless steel, and it's a very poor conductor of heat. So the heat is not being transferred all the way through. If you take a close inspection down here on this side, notice where Sarah has her left hand at. Notice that it's directly behind the discoloration you see on the rod, where the rod is still shiny, where we still see the shine from the stainless steel. So that is a good area. Now towards that tip, that color begins to discolor with that gray and eventually black. We're not placing our hand in that blackish area. That is the danger zone. Can you just give me a second? That torch is really, really loud. How does this glassmaking facility compare to other glassmaking facilities in the United States? Well, this is the highest level of professional glassmaking around this area, and I would say internationally it's one of the top also. The way that we work here is we have visiting artists. We don't do just demonstrations. The way that this museum compares to other is we're pretty much Disneyland for artists. There's so many different ways an artist can arrive at the museum. It could be through application. They could be awarded, recognition. There's so many different ways, but eventually if you are asked to come down to the Museum of Glass, we give you this full professional crew you see back here. They can make whatever your heart's desires, and today we're actually pushing that. Earlier, we're talking to Gabe and talking about how complicated this vessel is because they're all going to be in one. So you have quite a different few pieces that will be used to create this one solo piece. What other countries have glass as a major? Murano, Italy, the island of the glass makers. Everything you see here is all based off of Italian glassmaking. That's due to in the 70s, late 60s, Italians came over to the United States to teach us Americans how to blow glass. That is why American glassmaking nearly identical to Italian glassmaking. Although there is different types of glassmaking, like Czech style glassmaking, Swedish style glassmaking. One key difference is that they do it standing up and we do it sitting down. But it just happens to be that it wasn't them that came to the United States, it was the Italians that taught us. It's pretty crazy, but there's a whole world of glassmaking unknown to American glassmaking, just because we're not really seeing that kind of Swedish design and Czech-style glassmaking. But it's getting pretty big here. A lot of American glassmakers are kind of realizing that there is a whole new industry, a whole new world of glass out there left to explore. The way that we operate, the way that we stay open is by our wonderful audience. If you are a member of us, you're part of our family, and you're one of the main reasons why we stay open. So if you want to help us out, it's by becoming a member. So any scraps of glass that you see on the ground, unfortunately, we cannot reuse. Even though it's clear glass, it becomes contaminated with dirt and debris. The only clear glass we ever recycle here at this museum goes into this specifically marked clear bin down here. If color gets in here, we'll have to throw away all this glass away because we don't want to risk it. Can't risk having any color going into our furnace and melting and contaminating that full 1,000 pounds of glass inside. Unfortunately, we also can't give that glass away. If it were up to me, I would love to give it away, but we can't due to a liability. That glass is technically a ticking time bomb because it will break and crack and might explode. So it might break in 5 minutes, it might break in 50 years or 500 years. All we know is that at one point at a time, it will break. It might not be so violent. It might just be a simple crack. We just don't want to risk it here, however. Well, we are going to be picking up another drop of color, the amber solid color. We're now going to be making a middle portion that we will use later on. What will happen here now is that we have two parts sitting in our garage. One part will be used to create the very bottom, the next part, the very top part, that cone shape. With the black glass that we're going to use now is going to be making this kind of top portion. We're going to do what's called an encamo. Encamo means just you're joining separate pieces of glass. So we will see two parts with the line stripes and then one center without the stripes in the glass. So the colors themselves are by adding different metals to the periodic table of element. What's your favorite color, if you don't mind me asking? You're in the blue, right. To create blue glass, we can use lapis, or we can also use cobalt. That is blue glass. What's your favorite color? Favorite color? Purple. To create purple glass, we will add manganese. By adding a lot of manganese, we can create black glass. Do you have a separate favorite color, maybe? Also purple? What about you? To create pink glass, all right. If you like red and pink glass, you have expensive taste, by the way. Red and pink glass is made from adding gold, which makes it some of the more expensive color in the glass industry is red and pink glass. And you can really see that in the price point. It's definitely more expensive. Did you have a separate favorite color? Orange. That's a color I don't know. But don't worry, it's totally fine. I can ask right now, and I can find that color out if you really like to. Green glass is chromium and iron. Rust creates green glass. Specifically metals. One thing that I always find so amusing about glass, this is crazy, by the way. Glass is theoretically an amorphous solid. There is people in this world, like myself and Pew, that believe that glass should be in a separate state of matter. We know that there's liquid, gas, and solids. Some people believe that there should be a fourth one called the gaseous state. Glass is unlike any other materials. Even at this state that we see here, it's technically a liquid, but it's still a solid. The molecules in this glass have yet to form an amorphous, a crystalline structure, which is what we know as a solid. There's no crystalline structure, so the molecules are still moving in the glass, although they're moving at a rate that we will never, ever notice. And even it will take hundreds and thousands of years for the glass to actually move. It's technically a liquid, which is just amazing. I mean, there's no other thing in the world, in the planet, that is glass. It's believed that old glass that you see in chapels, that glass, if you notice, it's thicker on the bottom than there is on the top. For a long time, it was believed that you could see the glass dripping. Nowadays, we know that that's not what's happening. It's just due when they would make them, since it's hand-blown, they would think, well, since the bottom is thicker, it should support more. So that's why we have that. But, oh, man, glass is just an amazing material, unlike any other material there is on this planet. The basis of it is sand. It is possible to go to a beach out here in the Pacific Northwest and make sand, make glass out of sand. Here's the few key secrets. If you're ever going to do it, the first thing is you need an air channel. The fire itself is not going to get it hot. It's going to be the air that's going to be flowing in. That's going to increase the temperature. And then the next thing is you add a little bit of seaweed on the very bottom of the fire. Theoretically, it should act as a flux, so to lower the melting temperature, because it will create soda ash. And soda ash is our flux. The glass that we melt here at the museum is produced about 45 minutes north of Seattle. And it looks like an ice cube. This is what the glass looks like to us when we buy it from our manufacturer. Here we're melting spectrum glass nugget. There's different formulas of different formulas of glass around the country, but we use a local one. We do know what they add in this glass. We know the basic materials is silica sand, which is the purest form of sand. It's mined from the ground. It's not your average beach sand. They then add soda ash and lime as a mix, as a flux and stabilizer. However, we don't know the exact materials of each one, and we don't know if they add something else. It is top secret. It's patented. It's formulated. No one else knows that except them. Throughout the years, well, we just don't know exactly. I mean, out of all the glass in the world, this is one of the best ones. It just has a longer working time, which means it retains its heat longer, and we can maximize that heat. Leaded glass is notorious for having a long working temperature, and that's why it was used in factories for a long time, just because you could do so much in one heat. But it comes out that that's kind of dangerous. How long does it take to make a decent sized piece of glass? Our team can make pieces pretty quickly. But if we really wanted to, we can make some very decorative vases in like 30 minutes. But we're not here to make just stuff for to sell. We're here to push the limits of glasses in art form. On our top screen, we're actually going to get our mission statement here at the museum, because we're not here to sell glass, and we're not here to make hundreds of thousands of dollars selling glass. We're here to push the limits of glasses in art form. And that's what we're really about. We're here to inspire and create creativity through glass and glass making. Yeah, no problem. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Yes, after this, our camera will focus down there. The action starts on the left, but they move down to the center. Yes. Gorilla Glass is produced from Corning Incorporated, which is also the maker of Pyrex. Gorilla Glass is made pretty much in everyone's phone now, too. They originally started in iPhones, and now I believe it's branched out to all cellular devices. Their glass is specially formulated to resist scratching. There's all glass of worlds around the world. We're familiar with that soda lime glass. NASA uses a straight silica sand mixture. They don't add anything else but silica sand. That's why their glass is able to reach such a high temperature without melting. It's because it's just straight silica, which is incredible. Leaded glass is a different formula, and then again, that Gorilla Glass is formulated different for their own personal use. Hello. Welcome to the museum. So if you weren't here earlier and you're wondering how the color is applied, we're going to be showing you that process. Here we have Courtney, who's gathered glass on a bubble. We're going to bring over the solid color, and we're going to place that solid color right on top of that bubble. The glass maker's job now is to push that color layer nice and evenly around the bubble. It's very important that we get an even layer or an even distribution of color all the way around. If we don't, then we're going to have different densities of color in our final piece, and that's not what we want. We want an even amount of color all the way around. Well, we've been working on this project since 2 o'clock, so right after our lunch, we've been working on this project, and it's going to take quite some time for this buildup. Again, we are in commoing, which means we're adding separate sections of glass that will be joined together to create one finished piece. We are waiting for the finish of the encamo, which is happening down on this left-hand side. This will be the body, or essentially a dome, in our chalk drawing. As we enter the furnace for yet another layer, we're essentially gathering more glass so our piece can become larger. So if we want to make a piece bigger and bigger, we'll just take repeated dips. Typically after a gather, however, we will use a wooden block to ensure that the mass of glass has spread evenly throughout our bubble and also to spread the heat evenly. We are indeed making this piece larger by entering back into the furnace. Again, to simply break down the furnace, behind that door lies a crucible, a ceramic pot that we are heating up with natural gas, which is our fuel source here at the museum. On the top screen, we're seeing a diagram of that furnace and how it works. You can see the gas lines and how we're heating it up, essentially the crucible that the glass will sit on. So what we're seeing is we start off with a very small bubble. That bubble is getting larger and larger. Right now, we haven't really blown that bubble too much. We're actually letting the mass build up before we blow out the bubble. Why doesn't the glass break when we use the wet padded newspaper to shape it? That glass is just simply way too hot. The newspaper is, although it does have water and water is extremely bad to glass, the glass is just in a ridiculous temperature over 20, anything I would say only 1,000 degrees. Glass is probably not going to crack too badly. Yes. The woods that we use here, we specifically burn fruit wood, and we love burning fruit wood because it contains more moisture than any other type of wood. So typically we'll use a cherry wood. But it's also an added bonus because when it burns, this hot shop smells good, just like a barbecue. Plus, it is summertime after all. So the newspaper that we're using, the reason why it's not catching on fire is that we've drenched it in water, so it's waterlogged all the way to the center. It's pretty moist at this state. As we continue down here, do we have any questions from our audience? Any questions that you may have about what you're seeing here today? Again, our visiting artist is Leo Berk, standing very closely to the action. We then have the Museum of Glass Hot Shop crew transferring our piece to a different rod. So now that we have this new handle, we're going to break it free from the previous handle. So what we've brought over actually was what we call a puntetta, and it's used to pull glass out. There's not really one specific shape this massive glass should have. There's just one way we can pull out points. So the massive glass that we're working with right now is the center part of our drawing. So this kind of cone base is what we're working on. The bottom and top are sitting in our garage. We added a decorative stripe and stripe effect to those. Here soon we're going to be doing what we call the combo, is when we join two sections of glass together. So we're going to have two in combo parts. And oh man, this is definitely going to get interesting because it's just difficult to do three different encombos and then create this vessel that you see here in one take. Again, my name is David. I'll be roaming around the hot shop if you have any questions about what you see here today. We are going to be adding a separate piece, and we see that separate piece being worked on the left-hand side of the hot shop. We're ensuring that we have similar diameters, so when they meet one another, they're going to stick right on contact. We come over for what we call a price check. This is just to see, eyeball where we're at, if any changes need to be done. So it looks like we have the proper diameters, the proper dimensions. We're going to go ahead and heat up both lips of the glass. So when they meet in contact, they will be forever fused to one another. Well, now that we placed that first section, we are going to continue manipulating this mass, but we are going to be comboing one more section on the opposite end. So we're going to clean this vessel up. We're going to create the very top portion that you see now. So to look at our chalk drawing, but also our drawing right now, is we're going to create the very top portion with that encamo part we just added. That other black piece is going to be this round part. We will then add the very bottom section that will be also with that pinstripes and be created into a vessel. So this is going to be all interesting as this piece comes together here shortly. We are blowing through that blowpipe. We see Sarah blowing air, and she's expanding that bubble as we speak there as our piece gets larger and larger. repeat that again? A little louder. What do we use the air compressor for? We use the compressor to cool down one specific area we don't wish to not get hot. And again, if you have questions at any given time, please feel free to ask me. I'll be roaming around this hot shop floor in the top balcony. So as we continue to manipulate this massive glass, we do want to show you some of the pieces that our visiting artist has been working on. So on the top screen, we're going to give you a recap of the action we saw yesterday and earlier today on our top screen now. And we are back. So we are going to continue all this glass making fun down here. And if you're standing on the top balcony, you can hear some of the communication that the team is using, like blowing, blow soft, blow hard. The tool that the gaffer is using here, Gabe, he's using a graphite paddle, very dense layer of graphite to shape the massive glass. So I do want to show you one more replay of the piece we made earlier today. Now this is a giant cylinder, and on the top screen we're going to see the team take on this challenge. Now it's currently sitting in the annealer on your left hand side. When we put this piece away, when we're done with it, you will also see that large annealer. Now this large cylinder that you're seeing us make in the top screen is going to essentially become a tile later on in its life. Back in the olden day, if you wanted a sheet of glass, you would have to go to a glass maker. That glass maker would then make a cylinder for you. He would cut the sides of it or cut the bottom of it and then cut it right through the side. As it heated up, it would begin to unfold. And that's how sheet glass was created for a long period of time. And you can see it on this vessel. The way that we made our sheet glass, or this cylinder, is very decorative. So we started off by making a color cup. This has that yellow color. We then created a core with a decorative wrap design, similar to the previous pieces we made. Once this decoration of the line was complete, we stuffed our cup with hot molten glass, filling that cup up bottom to top. Once that was complete, we melted down our cup and our vessel, took an additional gather of glass to give us enough mass to work with. After all, this was a very large cylinder. After a little bit of teamwork, blowing, constricting, shaping, we created a giant sphere. That is how we determined the diameter. Once we had that diameter determined, we created the length, the width that we were going for. A little bit of water broke the piece free, and we were able to continue to work on the opposite end of the blowpipe. After a little bit more air blowing in, a little bit more shaping, we were left with a beautiful, gorgeous cylinder with that beautiful pattern on the very inside. Now that cylinder of glass will be made into a sheet glass by cutting off the bottom and cutting it right on the side, leaving us with a sheet of glass once it's heated up and unfolded. Just like earlier, we will now bring over a puntetta. A puntetta is a handle that we can use to pull glass out. Well, if you're joining us, welcome to the Museum of Glass. Thank you so much for joining us. We always get asked about this cone-shaped design we have here, and this is a very functional hot shop. Now hot air can rise naturally. We have a fan up there. Accelerates the chimney effect that we have here, allowing us to stay nice and cool all year around. What is the difference between the furnace and the glory hole? The furnace was where all the glass is kept. We're holding approximately 1,000 pounds of molten glass. On the top screen, you're seeing a diagram of what that furnace looks like. Behind that door, we have a crucible, a ceramic pot that's heated up by natural gas. Most furnaces, most studios that have a furnace will have maybe just one 500-pound. Here at the museum, this is one of the highest levels of professional glassmaking. So we have 2,000-pound furnace. Pretty unheard of. Even some studios have one 1,000-pound furnace, but not here. This is really high level, so we have two of them here at the museum, always turned on. They've never been turned off for over 8 years straight, nonstop, 365 days a year, all day. Just quite amazing. We also have the glory holes, which is a little bit different. The key difference is that the glory hole contains zero glass. It is just the chamber we enter to reheat the glass. On the top screen, we're seeing another diagram of that glory hole. You can notice that it is a round barrel on its side lined with fire brick made to insulate and keep the heat inside. What we're trying to do now is expand the very back part, the black part that you're seeing. But unfortunately, the way that the glory hole works, the very front of the glass is the first thing to enter, the last thing to leave. So no matter what we do, the front of the glass will get hotter before the back does. Now that's bad because we don't want that front to expand, only the portion directly behind that. So we've been using torches to counteract that heat that was given. We will now transfer our piece onto a different rod, bringing over a punty. This is the new handle, but remember, it will only be temporary, which means it will need to break later on in the process, just not while we're working with this piece itself. The remainder half that we have when we break it free is going to be a bowl. And oh man, things are going to get so interesting after that. A little bit of water, a small tap, the piece is broken free, and we can now begin to work on the opposite end. And on the left-hand side, Courtney has picked up the piece out of the garage. It's going to be our final encamo. Again, the encamo meaning you're adding separate sections of glass to become one. That section will be the very bottom portion you see here. It's getting quite difficult, as you can tell by now. We've worked such a long time really putting the top of this piece together, and all it needs to be done now is really get this bottom kind of shape down. What makes it difficult is it's going to kind of be what we call a low bowl shape, and low bowls are one of the most difficult bowls to create in the glass maker's arsenal. Well, if you haven't had a chance to check out the rest of the museum, right now is a good timing. The museum will be closing within 30 minutes. So if you haven't checked out the galleries and everything else we have to offer, now is a good time. However, if you decide to stick with us, we're going to continue this class making fun. We're not going to leave this museum until we're done with this piece we've been working on since 2 o'clock. And we're barely going to be adding the third transition, which is the next portion of this encalmo. To complete this transition, we will get both ends of the glass nice and hot. You're going to see a little red and orange on the end. That is a good sign of the heat that we are going for. And on contact, both these pieces should stick to one another. Essentially, only one chance to do this right. Want to make sure we're going to hit everything the first time on center. Since we removed our blowpipe, we no longer have the ability to inflate our piece and make it larger. But if we do want to inflate it, we will use what we call a soffietto. Soffietto meaning in Italian, little breeze. One way we can continue to inflate the mass of glass without a blowpipe. Look at all that teamwork going on. We're shielding our gaffer from the heat that the glass radiates off. Sarah here is taking all these necessary heats. This is what glassmaking is all about, teamwork. Again, we do have a visiting artist here today, Leo Berk, closely standing by to ensure he is happy with the vessel we produced for him here today. Now, the way that our residency program works is everything that we produce here will be going back with our artists. All we ask is for them to donate one piece to our private collection and then another piece for our annual auction. All right, so I do want to explain a little bit about what we just saw right now, and it all goes back to color, the way that colors work. Every color in the glass industry acts differently. Some colors are very soft, some colors are very stiff. The colors that we worked with right now are completely opposites. Black color is very soft, unlike any of this. I don't even use black glass because it always collapses on me, and I just realized black is not my color to work with. It is extremely soft. The amber color that we have there is a little bit more on the stiffer side. So when we heat it up, regardless of where the color is at, that black is going to absorb all that heat before and begin to move before everything else does. If you look very closely, we can see that. We can see that that black glass collapsed before that amber glass did. What's going on here is we just try to take the best heat we could possibly take here, and things like this do happen, unfortunately, here at the museum. Notice that they continue working. Notice that they never panic. They didn't get mad. They keep working with the glass. Now, this is what glass is all about. Okay? You can always write it down on a piece of paper how simple it should go, but it's never going to go like that. Glass has a mind of its own and always wants to do something different. Although we were aware of this that could happen, we always try to push ourselves also and try to push the limits of glass as an art form. It doesn't always come out that way. Notice that the team is already jumping right back on it. All right, what can we do to make it better? What can we fix now? We're trying to make this specific piece you see here, which is also this one that you see here, this time completely out of glass. What was difficult about this is that we wanted three separate sections. So on the top, we wanted what we call cane work. And on the very kind of bottom part, we also wanted the cane work. In the middle part, we wanted it to be completely black. And that's what we saw right now. Even with those canes, that cane wasn't absorbing any of that heat. It was that very black portion. That black is a soft color. And as we can see now, it is difficult to work with. Well, this crew learned a fortune about what the experience they did right now. Again, this was what we're trying to go for. I believe we are just going to put this piece away. The day is, it's quite already end of the day for us. We are going to be closing in about 5 minutes here at the museum. So we've decided just to box this piece. I believe that that top portion will be used later on by using a saw and cutting it free of that kind of that black portion where our bubble collapsed. Again, we thank you for joining us, but things like this do happen here at the museum. You can have one of the best crews in the world here, and things like this will still happen every now and there. Although it is very rare, it does happen here, even at this stage, at this level of professional glass making. But again, we're just here to push the limits of glass as an art form, and a couple things will break along the way, of course. Chances are we will probably do this piece again, but this time it's going to come out perfectly. So we learned a lot about this because there's no rules on how to make this. We can't Google it. Our glassmakers kind of have to think about it as they go along. And most of the times we just make rules up as we go and do this. But once again, can we give our whole crew a round of applause? They did just such an amazing job. I guarantee you that if they do this again, they'll probably approach this differently. They learned a lot. Something that our audience doesn't really notice is when they're down here, the glassmakers are always asking each other what is the best way. They're always taking into account their professionalism and their experience they've had. Originally, this piece was going to be on a different rod, but after the crew discussed it a little bit, they decided to use a different rod, a different transfer rod. And a lot of things, these things changed. I can already tell that the crew is going to, the next time they make that piece, they're just going to approach it differently. They're going to do it more stable. And it's going to come out fantastic next time around. We save it just so we don't, I mean, we've been working since 2 o'clock. Yeah, exactly. So we'll just put it away, give it to our artists. Again, they'll keep everything regardless of what we make here. It's up to him what he wants to decide. Mhm. Yes, but it's more financial if we just kind of remake that piece that looks similar to it. That's cane work. It depends how complicated your glass is. It's just a very fancy way of coloring the glass.